Shalom. I am Robert Spector, President of Rock of Israel Ministries. I'd like to share with you a short telling of my father's story, how he came to believe that Yeshua is the Messiah of Israel. He was born in 1918 during the flu epidemic that year that took his father's life. So at 2 months old, he lost his father. His mother stayed single. She had 3 children to bring up, and it was a difficult time, of course, 1918 and then into the Depression and all of that. She worked hard to make a living for her 3 children and herself. She had grown up in an Orthodox home and she taught her children the ways of God, the ways of Judaism. And so it was a surprise to all when she became a believer in Yeshua, for she had taught her children never to even mention the name of Jesus. She told them that at that name, her people had been persecuted, and sure enough, my father was called the Christ killer, and he had great hate for Christians for their prejudice against the Jewish people. And so it was with that upbringing, Orthodox upbringing, that he came to the day when his mother turned on her religion and became a quote-unquote Christian. She had left the faith in his mind, and so he had much angst against the people that had taken her away from what she had taught her children. But one day, she was going to have a party for one of the children, his sister, and she asked him to come home and participate, and he said no. But who was going to be there? And she told him the pastor was coming, and of course he said no way. And so he went out to the dance, and for some reason he got very ill on the dance floor and had to go home. He got home and saw that the people were still in his home, and he said that I'm the man of the house, and I'm going to tell them to leave. And he went in to tell this pastor to leave his home. Well, the pastor was affable and just started a conversation about sports, which my father enjoyed, and so he delayed his telling the pastor to leave. But all of a sudden, the pastor asked my father, had he ever asked God whether or not Jesus was the Messiah? And of course, my father said, oh, I know he's not. I don't have to ask God. And the pastor said, are you afraid? And my father, being what he thought the man of the house was, said he was not afraid of anything. But the pastor pressed him and said, well, ask God. And so to show and the pastor, he was not afraid. He agreed to ask God. And so he asked God whether or not Jesus was the Messiah. And of course, he didn't expect an answer. But when you ask God to show himself, he does. So he asked God, and God began to work in his heart. Immediately, my father felt something strange inside of him. A strange emotion began to well up in him, and he didn't know where it was coming from. But of course, he had just asked God to show him. And so that began a series of events, supernatural events in his life that proved to him that Jesus was the Messiah, that he is the Messiah, and that he is the soon coming King of Israel. And so my father dedicated his life to being a light to the Gentiles. The calling of Jewish people is to proclaim God's name in all the earth. And so he went as a missionary to Haiti, where there was voodoo and witchcraft, and to Africa, and proclaimed that Jesus was Lord. And then he came back and to America to tell his fellow men, the Jewish people. And that's when he started the Rock of Israel Ministries. And so I challenge you, if you are unsure, if you don't know who the Messiah is, I challenge you to ask God if Yeshua is the Messiah. I know that God can speak to you and give you a sign. Scriptures talk about signs and the signs that were given to Abraham and many others, Moses, and so many people of the Bible. So I challenge you, ask God for a sign. He gave a sign to my father, and I know he will give a sign to you. Shalom.